The wind moved gently across the vast expanse of the prairie, carrying with it the low hum of cicadas and the faint creak of wagon wheels rolling slowly across a dirt road that had seen too many travelers to still be called young. The sky stretched wide, painted in muted shades of orange and violet as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows from the tall grass that swayed like restless spirits whispering secrets to anyone who dared listen. Along this road rode a man named Elias Kane, a rider whose face bore the weight of countless miles and a heart scarred by battles both fought and fled. Elias had no destination written on paper, no map folded in his satchel, only the faint call of something that lay ahead, something he couldn't quite name but felt deeply in his bones. Every hoofbeat of his chestnut horse, Jasper, echoed against his ribs like a reminder that the trail was never silent, never without memory. He had left behind towns filled with whiskey, gambling, and lies. He had left behind a woman with eyes as deep as the midnight sky who had begged him to stay, but Elias carried with him an unshakable truth: some men were born for the trail, and the trail never let them rest. The settlement he arrived at just before dusk was a modest one, a handful of wooden buildings lined up like soldiers refusing to surrender to the wilderness. The saloon's lanterns flickered with promise, and laughter spilled into the street, mixed with the lonely notes of a piano. But beneath it all, Elias heard the trail whisper again, tugging him toward something darker, something waiting. Inside the saloon, smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling beams. Cards slapped on tables, coins clinked, and the piano's melody danced unevenly as the player's fingers stumbled from too much bourbon. Elias ordered a drink and stood at the edge of the room, observing. His eyes caught a young woman, not much more than 20, dressed plainly, her hair tied back but her gaze sharp as a blade. She was serving drinks with the precision of someone who had long grown tired of it, but her eyes carried a fire that refused to die. "Don't see your kind much around here," she said, setting his whiskey down without flinching at the look in his eyes. "And what kind is that?" Elias asked, his voice low, gravelly from dust and silence. "The kind that looks like he's running from more than the dust on his boots." Elias smirked, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Then you see too much." Her name was Clara, he would learn. She had come west with her family, but only she remained. Her brother had vanished on the trail, leaving behind nothing but rumors and whispers that he had crossed paths with men who owned the night, men who lived in the shadows of law and conscience alike. Clara worked here because she had nowhere else to go, but she held on to a fragile thread of hope that her brother might still be alive. Something about her words, her stubborn fire, struck a chord in Elias. He had told himself countless times that he would not be pulled into the lives of others anymore, that his soul had too many burdens already, yet the whisper of the trail inside him grew louder. It wasn't just wind and memory, it was guiding him. And it pointed toward Clara's story. Later that night, outside beneath the endless sky, Elias found himself listening as Clara spoke of her brother. She had heard of a trail beyond the canyons, a dangerous stretch known as Devil's Pass, where outlaws were said to vanish into the rocks. Rumors spoke of a hidden camp, where men with no names gathered, where the law dared not tread. Clara's brother had gone searching for work, but perhaps he had found chains instead. Elias knew the kind of men who lived by the code. He had ridden with some once, long ago, until he realized that the blood they spilled never washed away. He saw the plea in Clara's eyes, though she never directly asked for his help. It was the silence between her words, the quiver she tried to hide, that tethered him to her cause. The next morning, Elias saddled Jasper and set out with Clara riding beside him on a bay mare borrowed from the livery. The trail bent and twisted through lands untouched, where the earth seemed to breathe and the rocks stood like silent judges. Days turned into nights, and still the whispers followed Elias, sometimes in the rustle of the leaves, sometimes in the crackle of the fire. He wondered if they were voices of the dead, of men who had ridden these trails and never returned. Clara rode with quiet determination. She was not skilled with a gun, nor hardened by war, but there was an unyielding steel in her spirit. More than once, Elias caught her staring into the flames of their campfire, her lips moving in silent prayers, her fingers brushing the locket she wore around her neck, a small piece of her past she clung to fiercely. On the fourth day, They found signs of boot prints too fresh to be relics, ash from a fire not long gone cold, and the faint sound of laughter carried on the wind. The outlaw camp was close. Elias knew then that Clara's hope might crumble, for men like these rarely left captives alive, and if they did, the living often envied the dead. When the camp revealed itself, nestled in the rocks with fires burning low, Elias and Clara watched from the shadows. Men moved about carelessly, their guns resting at their sides, their laughter filled with cruelty. And then Clara's breath caught there, bound and weary, was her brother, Thomas, alive but broken, his face bruised and his body trembling from exhaustion. Clara's hand gripped Elias's arm. "He's alive." Her voice cracked, fragile and fierce all at once. Elias's mind spun. A frontal charge would mean death. These men were wolves, and wolves tore apart anyone foolish enough to cross them. But the whispering of the trail grew louder, and Elias felt the weight of destiny pressing against his chest. He had run from many battles, but this one demanded his presence. When night fell, under a sky thick with stars, Elias moved like a shadow. His revolver gleamed softly in the moonlight, and his knife pressed silent vengeance into the throat of the first guard who never saw him coming. Clara, though terrified, followed close, her heart pounding as loud as the cicadas had once hummed. Gunfire broke the night when one outlaw stirred too soon, and chaos erupted. Elias fought like a man possessed, his bullets striking true, his movements sharp and merciless. Clara ran to her brother, cutting his ropes with trembling hands. Thomas gasped, his voice barely more than a whisper, but his eyes filled with tears when he saw her. The fight raged. Men cursed and fired into the dark, but Elias seemed untouchable, a phantom of the trail who had finally stopped running. The whispers guided his hand, steadied his aim, until the last outlaw fell, his gun clattering uselessly into the dirt. Silence followed. A silence so heavy it pressed against the skin, broken only by Clary's sobs as she clutched her brother to her chest. Elias stood there, blood on his hands, his chest heaving, and for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar: peace. When dawn came, painting the world gold, Clara and Thomas rode back toward the settlement. Elias lingered, his eyes tracing the horizon. Clara begged him to come with them, to stay, to rest. But Elias shook his head. "The trail's not done with me yet," he said softly. "It whispers still." And with that, he turned Jasper toward the rising sun, his figure shrinking slowly into the endless expanse until he was no more than a shadow upon the earth. The prairie carried his name in its whispers, a man who had given hope where none remained, a man bound forever to the road that had both cursed and defined him. For the trail never ends, it only waits for the next soul willing to listen to its call.